Sahana vavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahai, tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Apadam apahartaram Dataram sarvasampadam lokabhiramam Shri Ramam bhuyo bhuyo namamyaham samasta jana kalyane niratam karunamayam namami chinmayam devam sadgurum brahmavidvaram. Hari Om. Thank you for chanting. We always hear Yajurveda chanting for the most part. And it's very rare to get the chance to hear Samaveda chanting. And so that's the privilege we had today, to listen to these Samaveda mantras. So thank you so much. Yesterday, we had left off in the middle of our investigation. We were looking at what do we know right now about our existence in the world right now? What do we know? And we concluded that there is, number one, the individual, right? Which we called Jiva. And this individual lives in the world called Jagat. And we also know the individual was not responsible for the creation or the control of this world either, correct? If we were, we would never have to experience sorrow, correct? You would never have to, exactly. So we know we don't control it. And so there is a creator, and there must also be someone or something that is controlling also. And so we established there has to also be Ishwar. So there's three things comprising of our experience right now, of what we know right now. Jiva, Jagat, and Ishwar. Okay. And so I left off saying, I gave you the Taco Bell example, but I have a more Vedic example for you. This is brought out, this teaching, that in fact all three of these things are nothing but an expression of one thing alone, of one reality, which we had called something yesterday. Do you remember what we called it yesterday? Paramatma, right? Paramatma, or a synonym would be Brahman, right? All three of these are expressions of Brahman, that one reality. And to explain this point, or to illustrate this point, of course we can use Taco Bell, but there is a story in the Upanishads. And this story comes in the Chandogya Upanishad. And there is a dialogue between a father and a son. The son, his name is Shwetaketu. Shwetaketu. And basically Shwetaketu was a young boy, but he was quite old in the sense that all of his friends had gone and studied and they had learned, their whatever knowledge they needed. But this Shwetaketu had gotten quite old and he still hadn't gone and studied. And so his father was pretty upset about that. And so his father said, you need to go learn, go study. And so his father sent him his father couldn't teach him because he was going somewhere. Okay, that's what the Upanishad says. He wasn't there. So the father sent him to learn. And so this Shwetaketu learns, he gains all kinds of worldly knowledge, and he comes back home. And in the process of learning all of this, Shwetaketu started feeling that my God, I've learned so much. I know a lot. I'm pretty smart. In fact, I'm probably smarter than my dad now. And so he came back and, with his nose in the air. And Shwetaketu's father realized that Shwetaketu this knowledge hasn't humbled him. He's learned so much, but knowledge hasn't humbled him yet. And that means he hasn't learned that knowledge by knowing which everything is known, by knowing which one attains Shanti. That knowledge he hasn't learned yet. And so Shwetaketu's father was listening to everything he was saying. And as any father would, if you see your child being a bit arrogant or, talking back, your, BP might go up a little bit, seeing your child act that way. Okay, that was my segue into another dad joke. This dad joke is probably the most dad-ist of all. So the more dad level it gets, the more laughter I have to hear. Okay. There was a science teacher, and the science teacher asked, one of the children, she said, tell me, what is the boiling point? And the child was like, oh, it's when my dad sees my report card. Thank you for laughing. Okay. So Shwetaketu's father felt that to this Shwetaketu, I have to give him that proper teaching, that knowledge which is going to humble him. And so Shwetaketu's father asks him, he says, do you know that by knowing which everything is known? Shwetaketu was like, no, I don't. I didn't learn that. I guess my teachers didn't know any better. And so Shwetaketu's father was like, okay, I'm just going to have to deal with this for the rest of the teaching. But he started giving the teaching. And he started off by giving a few examples. He gave the example first of clay. He said, once you know a lump of clay, isn't it that you know all of the other modifications of clay? So once you know a lump of clay, you know the pot. You know the clay hut. You know every modification of clay just by knowing that one clay, correct? He gives another example. By knowing a lump of gold, don't you know all modifications then of gold? Regardless of what that gold appears like to you, if you know gold, you know the modifications. If you know gold, you know that the necklace is nothing but gold. You know the bangle is also nothing but gold. You know the earrings are also nothing but gold. These are all just different manifestations or names and forms. And the last example he gives is of iron. He says, by knowing iron, don't you know all of the manifestations of iron? In other words, by knowing one, don't you know all of its manifestations? By knowing one, don't you know the many? He then further says, like that, if you know Sat, now Sat we know. Sat is just another word for, we already saw two words for the same thing. Sat is another word for Paramatma. Paramatma is another word for Brahman. Okay. By knowing that one Sat, you will know all of its modifications. You will know all of its expressions. The most beautiful thing Shwetaketu's father tells him is that all of these modifications are nothing but Vacha Rambhanam. Vacha Rambhanam. They're Arambha. These words are nothing but words on the tip of your tongue. Names and forms are nothing but words on the tip of your tongue. Meaning, names and forms are secondary. Understand the substance to be primary. This is the point that Shwetaketu's father was saying. Now, if we apply this to our life, what's being said here is if I know Paramatma, if I know that Brahman, if I know that Sat, then in no matter what way that Sat expresses or that Sat manifests or that Paramatma manifests, I know all of these manifestations are names and forms, but the substance never changes. Correct. Jiva and Jagat is nothing but an expression, we say, of Ishwar. And that Ishwar is nothing but Paramatma, that Brahman, that Sat. You know, the point of saying this is that imagine now that you know clay, let's say, if you know clay, and that clay appears in front of you like valuable looking coins, or not coins, or cash, right? Like stacks of cash. It looks like that. Clay is molded to look like that. And that same clay is molded to look like a giant, ferocious shark. Because you know clay, you neither have extreme attachment to the cash, nor do you have extreme fear towards the shark, correct? Because you know clay. Like that, if I know Paramatma, if I know that Paramatma, then whether I am going through the absolute worst experience in my life, or whether I'm going through the absolute best experience in my life, I know that the substance is Paramatma. I neither have to get overly attached to the great experience, nor overly fearful or overly hateful towards the negative experience, because I know it is that one Paramatma that is expressing as all. Puja Guruji says, once somebody knows this, normally how we would react to situations, if something happens, don't we always react like, what? Right. Guruji says instead of reacting like, what, we should now say, so what? Don't say what, say, so what? You know what it is that you're dealing with. You know that the ups and downs of life are only secondary. What's primary is Paramatma, is Atma. Right now we struggle with that concept because we've given primary importance to all names and forms, correct? All names and forms have primary importance. Paramatma has secondary importance, if that. Normally we don't even include Paramatma in our day-to-day interaction or talking, right? And so the whole idea here is we are not bringing Paramatma from somewhere. We are not like conjuring up Paramatma from somewhere. The whole idea here is to shift our attention to that which was ever there, but that which we've been ignoring. Once we pay attention to that Paramatma, then all of the sorrows, all of the ups and downs associated with that which is not Paramatma, those things also fade away. It's about changing our vision. Vedanta is all about changing our vision. Okay. I told you this inquiry we're doing is in two parts, right? So we've covered the first part, right? What's the first part? Jiva, Jagat, Ishwar. These are all expressions of Paramatma. Okay. Now, Paramatma is another word, another name for that Paramatma we also saw was, you already said it starts with a B, Brahman, right? Brahman, you know, there's three words that we use to explain or describe Brahman. What are those three words? Sat, right? Existence, Chit, consciousness, and Ananda, infinitude, happiness. Okay. So in other words, aren't we saying Jiva, Jagat, and Ishwar, these are all expressions of Sat, Chit, Ananda, correct? Okay. So we look at ourselves and we feel, okay, if everything is an expression of Sat, Chit, Ananda, then we look at ourselves and we feel, but I'm full of anxiety and I'm full of stress and I'm full of sadness. Where is Ananda? I don't see this Ananda. How can you go on saying, how can Vedas go on proclaiming that Sat Chit Ananda is expressing as everything? Okay. So another example. You all know electricity, right? Okay, you're like scaring me. You all know electricity. So that electricity, if you plug in, let's say, a light bulb, right? When electricity passes through that light bulb, what kind of expression do you get of electricity? Light, right? When that electricity passes through a light bulb, which also has a fan with it, what kind of expression do you get? You get air and you also get light, correct? So that one thing, depending on the medium through which it's expressing, will express in different ways. It's the same one thing, but its expression can appear different depending on the mode through which it is expressing. So far, so good. Yes, so far, so good. Okay. Jagat is an expression of the Sat aspect of this Brahman, this world that we interact with. Jagat is an expression of Sat, right? How is it an expression of Sat? Don't you agree that our experience of everything is of isness, right? Don't we say this paper is here, this pencil is here, I am here. There's isness in everything. Even when we say something is not there, we say it is not there. Isness or existence is pervading this entire Jagat, right? We experience it as is. Okay. Jiva is an expression of Sat and Chit. Are you all here? No, we have to say yes to this. You all are here, right? Yes, you are here. Do you know you are here? Yes. Your existence is there, and you are also aware of your existence, correct? There is awareness also in the Jiva. Okay. Ishwar is an expression of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Now think about this. Where do we typically, normally, go searching for Ananda? In Jagat or in Ishwar? In Jagat, right? Can you get a direct expression of Ananda in Jagat, which is only expressing existence? No, right? And we experience this on a daily basis. We go on chasing Jagat and we still feel somehow unfulfilled, correct? If I want a direct Ananda, then where should I go? Ishwar, that direct expression, correct? You know who was an example of this was Dhruva. You remember Dhruva, the story of Dhruva, who wanted to sit on his father's lap. And he wanted to sit so badly. He felt that no matter what happens, at least once, I should sit on my father's lap. And he was told that if you want to do this, remember his stepmother. She was the one saying, no, you can't sit on his lap, you're not allowed to, and it's just not going to happen. And so Dhruva's mother said, if you really want to do this, then you go and pray to God, and God will make it happen. And he took it so seriously. He said, okay, I'll go pray to God then. And he left, and for months, he contemplated on Bhagwan. And Bhagwan blessed him with so much ananda that he no longer had this one tiny desire that I want to sit on my father's lap. He was so fulfilled, he was so happy, he was so complete just in that darshan of Bhagwan that from that point onward he was sukhi, he was fulfilled. This is called going directly to the source for ananda. If we think in our lives, are we going directly to the source for ananda? It's very difficult to say yes, right? Though this Jagat is an expression of that same Paramatma, you can only indirectly get ananda from Jagat, correct? Right. If you want that direct ananda, then the best thing to do is go to Ishwar, who is an expression of Satchit and Ananda. Okay. Which bhakti are we on right now? Why did we do this whole analysis? Which bhakti are we on? Fifth one, right? And we were looking at what part of that fifth one? It says, right, to do bhajan of what Vedas say, what Vedas are illuminating, what Vedas are talking about. I can only abide in what Vedas are talking about if I know what Vedas are talking about, correct? And so in a nutshell, what we just discussed, this inquiry we just conducted, this is essentially what all Vedas are culminating in, this understanding. To know that if I want Ananda as Jiva, first go to Ishwar. And then that Ishwar is going to reveal that that Ananda which you're getting from me is in fact your own nature. Because that Paramatma alone is the one substance by knowing which everything is known, everything is accomplished. Very beautiful way of thinking and very nice way of thinking of Ishwar also. It's a beautiful way of thinking of Ishwar, that Ishwar is in fact the very source of Ananda. Okay, once I know what Vedas are saying, then I can do what the first part of that fifth bhakti is talking about, mantra and japa, right? Now that you know what the goal is, hold on to the feet of Bhagwan, the very source of Ananda, so you can know that as your own self. Now that you know that's the goal, now your japa has meaning. Now your japa has context, right? Now when you do japa and you're taking Bhagwan's name, there's no arbitrary, there's no vagueness in why am I taking Bhagwan's name, why am I doing all of this japa. And even when we do things like japa, what is the point of japa? Any guesses? What is the point of doing japa? You all know what doing japa is, right? You take a mala and you start chanting name of Bhagwan. What is the point of that japa? How many of you do japa? Why are you doing it?
To quiet the mind.
Quieten the mind, okay. What else? Okay, so we'll start with making the mind quiet. So yes, japa does make the mind quiet. And when we do this japa, we are quietening the mind so that our thoughts can be directed towards Bhagwan. So that our thoughts can be directed towards that source of Ananda. Now on a practical level, if you want to start doing this japa, the way to do it is, in the beginning, if you just pick up a mala, it's very hard to concentrate, right? We do one or two names and all of a sudden your mind flows off somewhere else. But to take each name and deliberately bring your mind whenever it veers off, deliberately bring the mind back to your focus, to what you are focusing on, to that Bhagwan who you're thinking of. This is actually the most effective way of doing japa, because there's enough people who will just go one round after the next, and they'll just be chanting names and nothing will happen, correct? Japa becomes effective when you actually pull your mind away from all of its sources of distraction and you put it into the task that you are doing. Then that japa becomes effective. So even if a person does japa and can only get through, let's say, a few names, but they've actively tried to bring their mind to their object of focus, that japa is much more effective than just going up one round after the next, without any end in sight, without any goal in sight. All of these practices then, this is what we talked about yesterday, especially in question and answer session. All of these practices then, they have meaning only when you know what the goal is, right? Only when you know what you're trying to achieve through these things. Someone will diligently do japa because they know I'm trying to pull my mind away from this attachment towards Jagat. Pull it away, bring it to Bhagwan, so that I can go on thinking of Bhagwan, go on thinking about that expression of Satchit Ananda to the point where I understand it as my own self. When that's clear, then all of these practices have meaning. They'll resonate with you. If the goal isn't clear, then all of these practices just become practices. They become empty. We become like waterless clouds. Okay. So I promise this fifth one was the only like super heavy one. Now the rest of them are very nice, okay? Sixth one says, Chata dama sila birati bahu karama. Nirata nirantara sajjana dharma. I don't think we sang these. Did we sing these? Okay. Let's sing them. You remember our tune? Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Rama. 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 Mantra japa mama dridha vishwasa panchama bhajana suveda prakasa chatadama sila birati bahu karama nirata nirantara sajjana dharma Satava sama mohimaya jagadekha mote santa adhika karilekha आठव जथा लाभ संतोषा सपने हु नहीं देखई पर दोषा नवम सरल सब सन छलहीना मम भरोसहिय हर्षन दीना नवम हुए कऊ जिन के होई नारी पुरुष सचराचर कोई. We'll end here. So now we're on the sixth one. Sixth one says, Dhamma, Shila, Virati, Bahukarama, Nirata, Nirantara, Sajjana Dharma. The one who has Dhamma, control over these senses, the one who has Shila, good character, and the one who is withdrawn from doing too many things, withdrawn from doing too many, engaging themselves in too many things in the world. That person is the one who is always continuously engaged in sajjan dharma, in trying to be a good person. And not just a good person, but somebody who is cultivating their personality to be ready for knowledge, ready for truth. So what does this mean? The one who has good character, the one we say who has good character, is someone who has filled their personality with virtues. Filled their personality with virtues. Someone who, whatever they have understood is good for them, they are acting it also. Correct? This is when we say, oh, that person has good character, because you can see it enacted. Correct? To enact that good character, it requires something called shama, something called control of the mind. Control of the mind is when, despite the mind not wanting to do what is good for it, still we are able to bring the mind back to what the intellect wants, and we still do what is good for us. This is called having shama. It's like what we looked at before, right? Kapat is when the mind wants to do something else and intellect wants to do something else. The one who has shama is the one who decides what they want to do and follows through, right? Has understood what is good for them, and their mind is able to pick it up and actually do it. It doesn't cause so much resistance. It's not fighting you. for the most part, we feel like our mind is constantly fighting us, right? And it is given here that if we don't want this mind to fight us, then there's one more thing we can implement, and that thing is called Dhamma. Dhamma is control over the senses, right? There are many times where you may know this. If you get really upset at somebody and you want to lash out and you want to scream, meaning your mind has already lost it. You've already gone over the edge. Mind is already out of control. If you have Dhamma, you know that it's not worth opening my mouth and screaming. Or sometimes if it's your sibling, you want to just punch them or something. You know that you shouldn't do that, correct? Meaning all of a sudden, even though your intellect was not able to control the mind, that intellect was able to focus on the senses and control the senses. Both are required. This control over our senses and control over the mind, both are required for this next part, to have virati, or technically speaking, dispassion. Dispassion towards too many engagements in life. So what does this mean? All the time when we read in Shastras, it's have vairagya from this and don't do this and have shama, have dhamma, don't chase after objects of pleasure. And it seems very, very dry. And so here, essentially, it looks like that. Bhagavan is saying, have control over your senses, have control over your mind, so that you don't do that much in the world. Actually, when it is said to have virati, or have vairagya, towards too many actions, too many things, this urge that I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do this. What is being said here is actually to do whatever you are doing wholeheartedly. Because when you do something wholeheartedly, when all of your attention is put on the task at hand, you will realize that when your mind was elsewhere, you were not able to dedicate the appropriate, sufficient amount of time required to fulfill that action, whatever you were doing. Having virati from so many things to do in the world means to actually focus on whatever you are doing with your full attention. Someone who's fully focused on what they have to do, on what they're supposed to do, that person won't have time then to dwell on, well, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that, right? Think of your responsibilities that you have to do on a daily basis, right? Some of you are students, and so studying is one of your absolute primary responsibilities, correct? How often do you feel that you study wholeheartedly? Wholeheartedly you studied. Do you feel like that each time you study? No, right? So virati from other karmas, it's not like when, auntie or uncle tell you, only study, don't do anything else. What they're telling you is wholeheartedly study. You will realize there isn't that much time to waste in other places. Wholeheartedly study. Put your full attention, put your mind and your senses, engage them in the task at hand. And this applies to all of our daily duties also. What happens is we forget about what our responsibilities are, and we start thinking, okay, well, forget my responsibilities. I want to start doing other things. And we start doing those things half-heartedly. We do our responsibilities half-heartedly, and then we're wholeheartedly miserable. Correct? So think, whenever our Shastras are actually guiding us in this way, have control over your mind, have control over your senses, and don't get overly engaged in things that are distracting. It just means do whatever you are supposed to do wholeheartedly. Put your mind where your hands are. This is all it means. This person who is living in this way is actively, on a daily basis, engaging in cultivating the personality so that it is ready for knowledge. The example they always give about how this knowledge works, and we already know what is knowledge. Every single class I've been asking you what is knowledge. You already know. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahma. I am Paramatma. I am Sat. This is the knowledge, correct? And so the example that's always given is this knowledge is as though thrown out by the Shastras, by Guru, like seeds, right? It's given. Guru doesn't distinguish that, oh, I don't want to give it to that person, I want to give it to this. Guru and Shastra will just give the knowledge. Okay. Where will those seeds take root? Seeds are going to take root where the soil is cultivated, where the soil is tilled. Our soil is our mind. Our soil is this personality of ours. We have to till it, we have to cultivate it so that the seed of knowledge can take root, so that it can actually have some effect in our life. Correct. All of these steps we have seen so far, 1 through 6, these are beautiful ways by which we can learn to till our soil, till our mind. Starting with number 1, which was satsang. Second one, Rati in Bhagavad Katha. Number 3, Seva for the Guru without pride. The fourth one, practice what you preach, right? No kapat in life. Fifth one was kind of loaded. There are quite a few things in the fifth one. Understand what the Vedas say. Once you understand what the Vedas say, you have faith in what the Vedas say, then let your practices be contextualized by that understanding. That's the fifth one. It's a mouthful, but that's what the fifth one is. And the sixth one was have control over your senses, have control over the mind, so that you can focus on the task at hand. So that whenever you do something, you do it wholeheartedly. This is what allows somebody to now walk this path of sajjan dharma, this path of becoming a better person, of cultivating the personality. And we cultivate the personality, we said, so that our soil is tilled, so that knowledge can express. Okay, now we move into the 7th step, 7th bhakti. And from 7th onwards, we are going to see a change in vision. Now it's not so much of doing and practicing, it's about how this vision has changed. So what does it say here? Satava sama mohi maya jagadekha. Mote santa adhika kari lekha. This is a twofold step. Here it says, now bhakti is when you see Bhagwan as everything around you. It's a vision change. Now you see everything as nothing but Bhagwan's expression. You can do this, why? Because you engaged in the 5th step, which was to actually understand, yes, Bhagwan is expressing as everything. When one sees Bhagwan, literally, Bhagwan is becoming more primary. Names and forms are becoming secondary. This is that 7th step. We may ask, how do you go from one step to the next? Like, how do you go from one step to the next? How do you progress? So obviously you will need some kind of like booster, right? To go from satsang to then take rati in satsang, you'll need some kind of like booster, right? To go from living a life of being a good person, cultivating the personality, doing the task at hand wholeheartedly, from going from there to going to, now that has allowed me to see Bhagwan in everyone, in everything. You need some booster. The thing is, I'm not saying this so that now you can like wait. So Bhagwan is going to send something and now I'll be able to move on to the next step. Bhagwan is constantly sending these pushes in our life. Through people, through satsang, through dukkham, through sorrow also. Sorrow is one of the greatest boosters in life. Gurudev has always said, the world, if we look at it properly, the world is nothing but an invitation into inquiry, an invitation into truth. The world, full of its ups and downs, full of its sorrow also, It's inviting us to inquire, think about it closer. Is this world really it, or is there something more? Dukkham is one of the greatest boosters we can use. But rather than looking at this dukkham as a boost to start taking this path seriously, we look at dukkham as an excuse not to take this path seriously. Right? We feel, oh no, today is a bad day and Bhagwan won't like me anyways because I'm crying, and we have all kind of weird ideas. Actually, treat dukkham as like that very booster that you need to start this path and take it very seriously. See that whenever sorrow comes in life, oh yeah, I used to think this was sorrow and this was the end of everything. But now I treat it as an invitation to better my personality. What can I learn from this sorrow? Slowly allow these things to change your vision. So these boosters, we don't have to wait. Don't think there's like, you're gonna get like an Amazon package of like, here's your like boosters for, or like, what do they use, when you work out, you need like extra supplements. There's no supplement here, okay? Here, Bhagwan is already sending all of these invitations to take this path seriously. We just have to become aware of them. We have to turn our attention to them. Okay. Bhagwan also says, Mote santa adhika kari lekha. This is very beautiful, what Bhagwan says here. He says, now this person who has done this kind of bhakti from steps 1 through 6, and now has entered into 7, where they see nothing but Bhagwan expressing everywhere, that person will always feel that, of course, Bhagwan is great. Bhagwan is the absolute goal. But for that person, they feel the one who revealed Bhagwan to them is in fact greater. This is what Bhagwan is saying in this 7th step. That treat those who reveal Bhagwan, who guide us to Bhagwan, treat them in fact greater than you would Bhagwan. If we think of our saints, our whole saint tradition, and saints in India, there's plenty. There's no lack of saints in India. If you think of their lives, in fact, it is when we think of their lives and what they went through, the bhakti that they had, that truly touches our hearts. When you think of, let us take Santa Tukaram, for example. The kind of sorrow he had to go through, to face famine, to face death, to face insult, to face all of these with a smile on his face. These saints, their life is actually what touches our heart. And why does it touch our heart? Because we see they also went through such great tragedy, such great hardship. But there was something that allowed them to rise above, right? And when we hold on to their feet, all they do is take us to Bhagwan's feet. And in this way, it is like they're our bridge. They're like our connector to Bhagwan. If they weren't there, these wise people, these great people who are also inviting us to think of a higher purpose, to think of Ananda, where that Ananda actually comes from. If they weren't there, we would be on the other side still drowning, thinking Bhagwan is still somewhere outside. Bhagwan is still somewhere very far. Bhagwan takes a lot of effort to get to. Our saints are like this bridge. They allow Jiva and Ishwar to become one. This is what saints do. And this is why Bhagwan feels that in life we should always revere these saints, always revere those who guide us to a higher purpose, guide us to Bhagwan. Okay. The next one, Athava Jatha Labha Santosha. Sapanehu nahi dekhai paradosha. This one is beautiful. The 8th one, the 8th step now. The 8th step is to be content with whatever you get in life. To be content. Have santushti. How many of you know who Marie Kondo is? Okay, everybody knows who Marie Kondo is. So if in a nutshell, you have to explain what she does. She basically goes to people's homes and she declutters their homes, correct? And she has a very nice technique or nice method where she doesn't buy extra furniture. She doesn't buy like organizing materials. She doesn't break down a person's house and say, oh, you have to rebuild this area and then we'll have more. She doesn't do any of that stuff, correct? But at the end of whenever she, like at the end of her treatment, right, at the end, everybody feels so light, so decluttered, so happy, right? She keeps everything exactly the same, but somehow everyone is. They're in the exact same house. They haven't added square footage. They didn't like put their stuff anywhere else. It's in the same house. And yet everybody feels so happy. What I like about Marie Kondo is that without people knowing, she teaches people this quality of santosha, to be content with what you have. If you notice when she walks into people's homes, everybody starts off saying that you have no idea, you know, everything is so difficult because there's just so much clutter going on and we're all fighting and we can't find things, and they have all of these things that they say, correct? And Marie Kondo, the first thing she'll say is, okay, wait, let's pause. I'm going to now greet your house. You guys have seen the show, right? Or have you read the book before, her book? She'll walk into people's homes and she'll say, first, let us greet your home. Let us greet the house. And so she'll sit down, she'll close her eyes, and she'll say, thank you, house, for taking care of this family for so many years. Thank you for providing shelter to this family for so many years. Thank you for allowing this to be a place where this family can come together and relax. And now it's the same house that this family absolutely hated, right? They wanted to change it. And now all of a sudden, all of the family members are like, oh yeah, I didn't realize these four walls and this roof are doing so much for me. It's beautiful, actually, this message of santushti, to be grateful for what you have so that you're no longer coveting what you don't have. That consumes so much of our mental energy. That consumes so much of our life that we tend to forget what we already have. And we have so much. Everybody, if they were to look into their life and really think about how they were able to get to the point that they are now, get where they are now. We can only get to that understanding if we really think through what all has already been provided for us. You know, she'll also ask people to like empty their closets and clean their closets. And so she'll tell everyone to dump everything out from their closet onto the floor. And this is very beautiful. She'll tell people, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to pick up a piece of clothing and you're going to feel, does this thing spark some joy? Spark joy. Okay. If it does, keep it. And if not, she doesn't say if not, like go burn it and never look at it ever again. If not, thank it. Say thank you, you've served your purpose, and now I'm done. You donate it, whatever you have to do. So there's also a grace in letting go of the things you no longer need. You know, to let go, part with the things you no longer need. To recognize everything has served its purpose in my life. There are things that I may need to continue onwards with. There are things that I should just learn to let go of. They've served their purpose. And that grace can come only when there is an attitude of gratitude. Only when we're grateful for the things that we've had, for the purpose that these things have served, only then will there be santosha. Otherwise, there will always be a struggle. Always. How many of you struggle with parting with your clothing? Like clothing that you've owned for years, there's holes in them and you still don't want to give it away or reuse it. Yeah, it's difficult, right? But we never think about, you know, the purpose that these things have served in our life. We never think about the gratitude we should have for the things that have come into our life. The most beautiful example of someone who lived with a great amount of santushti in their life, contentment, relative contentment. This santushti is contentment at the worldly level, in terms of objects and people and places. This is being content at the worldly level. Because only when you're content at the worldly level is there any hope to be content through Paramatma, right? You know why this is the case? If you are not content at the worldly level, meaning this world itself gives you too many problems, and you feel your problems are in the world outside, and then all of a sudden you feel, oh, this wonderful Vedanta solution has come. Now I just have to know myself as Brahman, and I'll hold on to that Paramatma, and everything will be done. That path will be so miserable to hold on to Paramatma. You know why? Because look at what's required to hold on to Paramatma. Shama, Dhamma, being focused on what you're supposed to do. These things are required, correct? Now imagine for the person who feels the world is giving me too much problem, and so I want to escape it. For that person, the moment the world turns into a place where it's conducive for them, what do you think they're going to drop first, the world or Paramatma? Paramatma. Right, they'll drop this whole pursuit itself. This is why, actually, we have to work through the world we're living in. It's not about escaping the world. It's not about let me leave everything behind and then search for Paramatma. It's about working through the world that I live in to then reach that Paramatma, understand Paramatma. Only if I'm content here, only if I'm grateful for what I have, I'm happy with my life, only then can I focus all of my attention on a higher purpose. Otherwise, we all know our attention will be pulled in hundreds of different directions. And that kind of attention is not sufficient to abide in Paramatma. I was saying one of the most beautiful examples of someone who lived this life of santushti was Sudamaji. Sudamaji. So Sudamaji was Bhagwan Krishna's dearest friends. And for Sudamaji also, Bhagwan Krishna was his dearest friend. And Sudamaji was somebody who he dedicated his entire life to Brahma, to realizing the truth, his whole life. And because that was the case, he didn't have much time to, work a 9-to-5 job, etc. He didn't have that kind of time. And so because of this, he didn't have that much, materially speaking. He didn't have that many things, that many luxuries in life. And he never cared that he didn't have these things. He was so happy, so content in reveling in Bhagwan that none of these things actually bothered him. It was only when his wife came and said that, I think we should probably start eating sometime soon, that he felt, yeah, maybe I'll also go and, find some source of food or something, some wealth to hold us over. And even when he was asked to go to Bhagwan Krishna, for food or for some kind of wealth, actually in Bhagavatam it says his intent was never, it's not like he agreed with his wife that I'm going so that I can get something so that we'll be happy. He only agreed because he felt through this excuse I'll be able to see my Bhagwan. And taking the name of Bhagwan, he ran to see Bhagwan Krishna. And it's so beautiful. See, when someone has that kind of bhakti towards Bhagwan, and again, it's not to say that everybody stop working your job and start starving and then Bhagwan will love you. The idea is see how deep Sudamaji's love for Bhagwan was. That actually Bhagwan had become primary for him and everything else became secondary. This is what I mean by reading with intent, right? Don't think that, oh, I have to take this literally and be a poor person and not strive for to put food on my table. It's not that. The idea is, see how deep Sudamaji's love was. Bhagwan recognized this. And so when Sudamaji came to Mathura, of course, only to see Bhagwan. When Sudamaji came to Mathura, Bhagwan, okay, who was the king at that time in Mathura, Bhagwan, just from the corner of his eye, saw that Sudamaji has arrived. And just seeing that, Bhagwan jumped from his seat and ran towards Sudamaji and embraced him. He embraced him so tightly. And of course, seeing that Sudamaji, a knower of Brahma, has come, Bhagwan felt, I should do this Sudamaji's Pada Puja. And Bhagwan was so overwhelmed with love. He was so melted by Sudamaji's bhakti that nobody even had to go fetch water to do Sudamaji's Pada Puja. That Pada Puja happened through Bhagwan's tears. With Bhagwan's tears, Bhagwan did Pada Puja of Sudamaji. When our bhakti is strong, Bhagwan's love for us becomes stronger. In stories like this, it becomes very difficult to decide who is greater, Bhagwan or his bhakta. At this point, in such kind of stories, you feel that both are equal, both are the same. Imagine to live a life where Bhagwan cannot wait to see you. Bhagwan cannot wait to meet you. Imagine if we lived a life like that. I encourage all of you, whenever you get a chance, to pick up texts like Ramayana and to pick up texts like Bhagavatam and to read these stories, again with intent. And to read these stories and not just to see the life of a bhakta, but to see the kind of love Bhagwan has for his bhaktas. See how happy Bhagwan becomes when a bhakta decides, my only goal in life is you. And the idea here is, when someone dedicates themselves to that higher purpose, there can be nothing but joy in that life. There can be nothing but joy in that life. Now the mind has latched on to something which is so great, which is so permanent, which is so fulfilling, that not only is the goal fulfilling, but the path is also equally fulfilling. The last thing you want is to walk this path of permanent sukham, but miserable, with tears in your eyes. You don't want to walk this path like, why do I have to do japa, and why do I have to attend satsang, and why do I have to do this? Remember, that's not the point. These practices are not the point. But the practices are meant to change our vision, right? So long as the vision is kept primary, then this path will be very easy. Path will be simple. Okay. Jatha labha santosha, sapanehu nahi dekhai paradosha. Here it says, in the eighth step, a bhakta who is content, who has this attitude of gratitude, this bhakta, even in their dream, will not find faults in another person. Even in their dream, they cannot think of anything negative about another person. This is probably one of the hardest things to deal with, to recognize or to not look at the negativities in a person. Because somehow we're programmed to only look at those things first, right? Even for ourselves. If there are 100 people in a room and 99 people praised you and one person insulted you, what are you going to remember when you walk out? The one person that insulted you, correct? This seeing dosha in others is actually, it is rooted in this sense that we want to change others, right? When we see a dosha in somebody else, our urge is, why can't they be like this? Why are they like this? They should be like this, correct? So this urge to want to change others, to want to change how other people think. Remember, in life, nobody is going to be 100% perfect. You're never going to have a 100% perfect interaction with anybody. Every single person is dealing with their own set of unknowns, their own set of unexpected events. Everybody's dealing with this. And so we have no right to look at another person and be like, why are you acting like this? Why aren't you acting like this? Everybody is dealing with unknowns just like we are. We also know if that's the case, then to look at another person and say, I want to change you, is pointless. Correct. How much control do you have when it comes to changing another person? Even your near and dear ones, who you love, who you see on a daily basis. How easy is it to change how they think? There's parents in the room, so parents for your children. How easy is it to change how your children think? And now there's children in the room. How easy is it for you to change how your parents think? It doesn't just happen, right? We have to quickly realize as sadhakas that changing the world outside is futile. It is not going to lead to anything. It is definitely not going to lead to Atma Shanti, for sure. If at all anything has to change, if at all anything can change, it should be ourselves. Ourselves. We are the only people we can change. So if at all we want to change anything, try to change your own personality. Try to change your own darshan, your vision of life. This is the point here. So to not see doshas in others means you have fully accepted that yes, people are going to act the way that they act. People are going to think that the way that they think. It is not my job to change how they think or how they act. You can certainly say what you want. You can certainly advise how you want. But to expect a change in somebody is not in your hands. If at all a change, if anyone can be held accountable for any change, it can only be yourself. And this is the greatest quality of a sadhak. That they're not interested in changing the world, they're only interested in changing themselves. There's a beautiful story of one Mahatma. His name was Akhandanandji Maharaj. Great Mahatma. Puja Gurudev used to sit and listen to his pravachans. He was that great. And there was a story where one of Akhandanandji Maharaj's students, his student accidentally felt that he insulted another student. He didn't mean to, it was not intentional, but he felt that the words I said have insulted this other student. And so that student went to Akhandanandji Maharaj and said, this has happened. And I didn't mean to say anything negative. I didn't mean to hurt this person's feelings, but I think their feelings are hurt. And so Akhandanandji Maharaj was like, did you mean anything by it? He was like, no. He was like, that's okay. But then again, the next day, the student came back and said, no, I really feel like this person has been hurt and I don't know what to do. And please guide me. And Akhandanandji Maharaj says, look, was your intention to hurt that person? He said, no. And Akhandanandji Maharaj sent him away. But then again, the next day, he did the same thing, complained, I really don't think he's okay, and I feel like I hurt his feelings. And I'm doing all of this sadhana and japa, I'm meditating and I'm trying to, be a better person. And Akhandanandji Maharaj looked at him and said, you have not done a single minute of sadhana. What you are telling me shows me you have not done a single minute of sadhana. Why? Because you're still trying to look for the result of this practice in the world outside. And so long as you do that, you will never find sukham. There will always be something or the other that doesn't match or doesn't line up with what you have understood. But that's exactly what the world is, right? Sadhana is what? To learn to accept gracefully the unexpected. This is how a sadhak lives. To gracefully accept the unexpected. to gracefully expect the unexpected. If you put out good intentions in the world, you don't have to sit here and expect good things to happen to you. The world doesn't work that way. Vedanta has already defined that the world is going to be full of a ton of unknowns, a ton of unexpected things. Our job is to change how we think about that world, to no longer hold that world as my source of dependence. This is a very beautiful thing. Akhandanandji Maharaj felt this student who has done all this japa, who has studied for so long, who is trying to be a good person. He looked at that person and said, you have not done even a minute of sadhana, meaning you have not understood the point. The point is not to change the world outside, it is to change you. Shankaracharya ji, in his commentary in Bhagavad Gita, he writes a really beautiful thing. He says, you should have kaha kim karma iti avyaprata buddhi. Kaha kim karma iti avyaprata buddhi. And in basic terms, what that means is, mind your own business. In Sanskrit, it literally means who is doing what and doing why. Don't worry about that. Shankaracharya ji also says, just mind your own business. Mind your own business means work on changing your darshan. Don't worry about if other people have changed their darshan. And when you're not worried about whether the other person has changed the way they're thinking, you are not going to pay attention to their faults. You are not going to pay attention to their negativities. Sapanehu nahi dekhai paradosha. Even in a dream, this wise person, this sadhak, this bhakta, cannot see faults in the other person. Okay. We are now on the 9th bhakti, the last step. The last step is Navama sarala sabasana chalahina mama bharosa hiya harashanadina. The 9th step says, this person who now has this vision of Bhagwan, how do they live in this world? They live with a very straightforward attitude, with an attitude which doesn't have any chala in it. Chala is like another word for this kapat, deceit, deception. So we saw earlier that chala was, that kapat, that deceit was within, right? Here, we're talking about how does this person now interact in the world, right? This person no longer acts in a way where there is confusion, where there is discrepancy. And so we're not talking about, okay, this person is not lying, this person doesn't steal, this person doesn't cheat. It's not that basic. What we're talking about here is there's a great sense of honesty that this person has when it comes to taking up responsibilities. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes, how many of you feel pressured if someone, someone you love tells you to do something? But you know that you have a full plate. You have a lot going on. You won't be able to do your due diligence with the request that has been given to you. How many of you still feel pressured to say yes? Yeah. And then when we do it, we're miserable doing that act because now we find that I'm stretched, I'm spread so thin. Correct. And then all of a sudden, our heart may also start becoming bitter, that why did they ask me to do this? They could have asked anybody else and blah, blah, blah. Right. Even to gracefully say no to somebody, that is called living without kapat, without chala. But if you say yes and you know you can't do something, there's immense chala there, immense inconsistency there. This is something we have to be, take seriously in our life. Very, 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 take great care about this. Don't be so heavily influenced by what you see and hear outside. Allow this teaching to simmer internally for the subject. It is a subjective unfoldment, correct? Is all of this Vedanta, is it meant for us to study here and then forget it and then just explain it to other people? I went to this awesome I hope you say awesome. I went to this awesome camp and we learned about bhakti, and bhakti is so wonderful. And then if someone asks you, well, do you practice it? No, I don't really practice it. What's the point of that study, right? What's the point if you can tell hundreds of people, but you yourself cannot implement it? To live a subtle life, a straightforward life, is when your intention is clear, your mind follows your intention, and your body then follows your mind. This is called living a subtle life, a straightforward life. And this also means you have to be aware of when your plate is full. If you have to say no to somebody, gracefully say no to somebody. It's not the end of the world, right? You know in your heart you didn't have any negative intention. You didn't have any negative feeling. Gracefully say no. That is in fact living a life of saralata rather than saying yes, thinking you're doing something good, but torturing yourself in the process. Okay. I read that part. Mama bharosa hiya harashanadina. And this last part is probably the most, it is like Bhagavan's stamp now on this knowledge. Bhagavan says, live your life in this way, live your life according to these 9 steps, and just have faith in Bhagavan. Have faith that the one who has brought you up to this point in life, that same one is going to carry you forward. Have faith. Do everything that has been prescribed. Live your life. Hold yourself to that higher standard. But have faith that Bhagavan only is going to take care of you, just as Bhagavan has taken care of you this whole time. Now Bhagavan Ram concludes his teaching, and he looks at Shabriji and he says, Nava mahu ekau jinake hoi. Nava mahu ekau jinake hoi. Nari purusha sacharachara koi. Bhagavan says, even if somebody has one, even if somebody implements one of these 9 steps, even one, and not just anybody, Bhagavan says, whether a man, whether a woman, whether someone sentient, whether something insentient, which is a huge thing to say. Anybody who implements these qualities, even one of them, that person is immensely dear to Bhagavan. So you'll wonder, what is Bhagavan? I know, everyone's thinking, what do you mean insentient thing can practice these qualities? You remember Ahalyaji? She was a stone. She had become a stone. She had become a stone, and she also received blessings and liberation from Bhagavan. The point here Bhagavan is trying to make is that you don't have to go now, let me check off step 1, now let me check off step 2, and let me check off step 3, and then slowly I'll eventually get to Bhagavan. Bhagavan is pointing out, if you just take one of these practices, let us say it is to live a life without kapat, without discrepancy between mind and intellect. Let us say we just start there. Eventually, your life will lead to a point where all 9 of these will start expressing. Someone who says, I want to live a life where I no longer have a discrepancy between my intellect and my mind. Slowly that intellect will want to know, okay, I've lived in this world, I know what can give me peace. And I'm living in a way where I'm able to attain that peace. Is there something more? Is there something beyond that? This peace is impermanent. Is there something beyond that? Once that inquiry starts, then what step do they get to? 5. Now you want to inquire into, well, what do these Vedas say? They're talking about something which is beyond this world, which is beyond these senses. Let me find out what those Vedas say. Once we know what Vedas say, right, then what happens? All practices start gaining context. They now have context. We now know why we are doing context. And now even to know what Vedas say, where would this person have to go? Satsang, right? So you see, you take any one of these steps, implement one, the other 8 will come flowing in. And Bhagavan says this is for anybody, this is for everybody. Not a single person should feel that only when I become a qualified student, then I can start implementing this. Bhagavan says, doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you are. Just start. Take one and just start. Bhagavan says, Soi atisaya priya bhamini more. The next line is most beautiful. He says, Sakala prakara bhagati dhridatore. Bhagavan says, even one person who practices even one of these qualities, that person is so dear to me. But hey Shabriji, you have all 9 of these. You are the very embodiment of all 9 of these qualities. Jogi vrinda durlabha gati joi, to kahu aju sulabha bhai soi. Now Bhagavan says something very, very beautiful here. He says, all of these meditators and all of these yogis who have been trying to contemplate on me, focus on me for years, doing all of this sadhana, you who have implemented just these 9 steps, you have attained that which is so difficult for these yogis to even to accomplish. You have attained that goal just through these 9 steps. Imagine, Bhagavan is saying, what I value more is not if you can close your eyes and sit straight and be still for hours on end. What he values more is what kind of heart do you have? What does your heart look like? How does your heart express? This is what Bhagavan cares about. And he says that is the direct way to come to me. Bhagavan says for those who are doing these practices without a pure heart, for them, Bhagavan will always be durlabha, very difficult to attain. But for the one who may not be doing the practice as such, but who is implementing these in their life, they're implementing these values, these qualities in their life, for that person, Bhagavan becomes sulabha, easily attained. Okay, I am going to stop here. For the chicks, I will take the rest of the portion. There's a bit more just to wrap up, but I'll just explain briefly what happens next. Bhagavan goes on and explains to Shabriji how pleased he is and how accomplished this Shabriji is. Imagine, this Shabriji was the one who looked at Bhagavan and felt, I don't know how to praise you. I don't know how I don't even know what to say in front of you, Bhagavan. I am nobody in front of you. And how Bhagavan uplifted her to this status by describing not what she should do, but who she already is. This is for us to realize Bhagavan only cares what does your heart look like. That's it. And if your heart is pure, if your heart is focused on Bhagavan, your heart is dedicated to Bhagavan, then Bhagavan says for you, his abode is simple, easy. It is as good as attained. Bhagavan then says to her that this gati that you are going to get now, this gati, where you are going to reach, this is a place where none have returned. Where none have returned. So later in the text it says that after hearing this, she bowed to Bhagavan, and in the fire of knowledge, she then went to that abode where nobody returns. You all must already know that shloka. Yad gatva na nivartante. She went there. She went to Tatpadam, that place where when someone goes, they no longer can return. What does this mean? Once that knowledge of who Bhagavan is, that knowledge of truth takes place, once we understand that Bhagavan which I was worshipping is in fact my own self, there is not even the slightest chance, there is not even the slightest possibility that one can ever go back to being this limited, miserable Jiva. Once Bhagwan is understood in Bhagwan's entirety, once that Paramatma is understood, once it is attained, there is no turning back. It is attained and it is attained. Swamiji used to always tell us that even somebody who doesn't want moksha, if they live this kind of life, they'll get moksha. There's no turning back from it either. This is such a beautiful thing. And this is such a beautiful stamp, guarantee that Bhagwan gives. That if you follow this path, if you come to know the truth, there is no possibility for regress. This is called permanent, infinite moksha. How many of you want moksha that once you get it, there's even a slight possibility that it can be taken away from you? Nobody wants that kind of liberation. Nobody wants that kind of freedom. We want freedom that once I have it, it can never be taken away. It can never go away. There's no possibility that it can fade. This is the guarantee. This is the mukti. This is the freedom that Bhagwan guarantees through this knowledge. Okay. Having said this, and Bhagwan having met his most beloved bhakta, that bhakta became one with Bhagwan through knowledge. And Bhagwan then proceeded on his path to continue his Leela. Shabriji is someone we can all learn from. We all have gone to wonderful schools. We all have learned so much worldly knowledge. We all have relatively good lives as far as material comforts, correct? And yet, Bhagwan was so keen to point out to her that I don't care about any of that. All I care about is a pure heart. And so that should tell us that all of these things that we have, all of these things that we feel are the goal of life. By looking at Shabriji's life, we should realize there has to be something beyond this. There is something else that guarantees permanent shanti, and it is not material things. We'll chant Shri Ram Jai Ram just a few times, and keep Shabriji and keep Bhagwan in your heart, and let us make the resolve that we too will learn to live by these values. Even if it's one of these values that may have resonated with you, take even one of them and start to implement it now. Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Ram. 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 Jaya Jaya Ram. Jaya Jaya Ram. Bole Shri Ramachandra Bhagavan ki Jai. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरिः ॐ श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरिः ॐ।